I'm very excited to introduce to you today Dr. Joel Wallach, because what you're about to hear in the next 120 minutes or so is nothing short of amazing. Our health is one of the most valuable things we have. We all want to be healthy and happy, yet with so much information out there, how do you know who to listen to? How do you know who's telling the truth when it comes to getting well? Dr. Wallach has degrees in agriculture and veterinary science and has been a physician for over 35 years. He was in charge of a monumental study that did over 20,000 autopsies on animals and humans and 10 million blood chemistries. He's written 14 books. He's been published 70 times all over the world. He was a Nobel Prize nominee. He sold over 180 million copies of his book and CD, Dead Doctors Don't Lie, and he's had to sue the FDA 8 times for the right to make certain health claims that are true. When he couldn't get doctors to take note of the fact that the animal industry eliminated almost every birth defect and over 900 diseases in animals with simple nutritional formulas, and that it should work the same way in humans, he became a physician himself. His work is now changing the lives of millions of individuals around the world. If I told you that almost all chronic diseases such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, arthritis, fibromyalgia, obesity, MS, migraines, eczema, psoriasis, and almost everything else you can think of was the result of nutritional deficiencies, and that you could make them go away 100%, would that be of interest to you and your loved ones? If so, the things you are going to hear in the next 2 hours have the power to change your life forever. Without anything further, let's turn things over to Dr. Wallach.
Appreciate the introduction. All right. I'm just going to start out, just a quick reminder, the thing that makes my view different is that I have a degree in agriculture. And in agriculture, we don't have health insurance for animals like we do people. And so we just had to get rid of the diseases. In agriculture, we have veterinarians who would take care of animals, and if he didn't fix it the first time out to the farmer never called you back. In human medicine, they treat you for 25, 30 years because you have insurance. Insurance has been the worst possible thing for human health because it allowed doctors to use you for an ATM machine. Even though there are cures available, they will treat you for 25 years even though there's cures available. There's no law requiring them to cure you when there's a cure available. Okay, that's a huge problem, as you're all finding out now. But you're going to learn some things today that will help you take care of yourself and the people you love. And, of course, I also have a degree in veterinary medicine. I'm a veterinarian. I also have a degree in comparative pathologist. I do autopsies on animals and people. I also have a degree as a physician, naturopathic physician. I'm a primary care physician in Oregon, licensed in Oregon and California for 35 years. And what I do differently from other doctors is I treat people like dogs, but they get better. Because in the dogs, we've learned how to eliminate 900 different diseases in dogs that still plague people. We've learned how to triple the lifespan of dogs. We didn't do that with organ transplants and stem cells and genetically engineered proteins and wonder drugs. We did it simply by putting vitamins and minerals in their canned dog food or their bags of dry dog food. And then we eliminated every birth defect you can name and 10 times that many you can't name. We eliminated all those birth defects just by putting vitamins and minerals in their food. There's not a single birth defect you can name that's genetically transmitted, although doctors would tell you they are, but there's not a single genetically transmitted birth defect. They're all nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. Okay, let's get to work here. We're going to divide this into 2 pieces. Number 1, I'm going to show you what the problem is, and then number 2, I'm going to show you how to eliminate these diseases, okay? Well, Americans spend more money. We've been doing this since the Second World War. We spend more money for health care than all the nations of the world combined. Not more than any nation, more than all nations. There's 204 nations in the United Nations, and we spend more money each year for health care than all of them combined. We spend just short of $3 trillion for health care. And what do we get for it? We're 92nd in healthiness. There's 91 other nations whose peoples are healthier than us, according to our CDC, the Center for Disease Control of Atlanta, Georgia. We rank 60th in longevity. There's 59 other nations whose peoples live longer than us, and God forgive us, we rank 41st in live births and first month survivability of our babies. December 2008, Time magazine cover article says the annual checkup of American health. Oops, the sorry state of American health. Remember, we're spending more money for health care than all the nations of the world combined, and the only thing they can say on the cover of Time magazine in December of 2008 about our health care is the sorry state of American health. Despite technological advances in medicine, Americans are less healthy than we used to be. Our health is declining. Okay, it's getting worse. More doctors, more pharmaceuticals, more insurance, more of everything, and it's getting worse. Worse yet is the next generation of kids are going to be worse off. Experts in medical schools tell us that our children are not going to live as long as us if things continue to go the way they're going. They're not saying that you're going to die at 75 and your kids are going to die at 72, 15 years from now. What they're saying is you are going to be burying your children. You're going to be standing at your gravesite burying your children if you don't change what's going on here. The doctors aren't going to change. The pharmaceutical industry is not going to change. We're going to have to do it. Now, the most important part of a human being's life is the first 91 days of pregnancy. That's when the embryo, after fertilization, the egg is fertilized by the sperm. The embryo goes down this assembly line. 91 days, it's assembled. After that, the rest of the 6 months of pregnancy is just building size. It's like a car going down the assembly line. Let's say the car is going down the assembly line. Let's say it's a Rolls Royce. I mean, we're talking about a $250,000 car, or $500,000 car. When it gets to the point where the fuel pump is supposed to be installed, there's no fuel pumps there, but the car keeps going down the assembly line. And then there's a place where the headlights are not supposed to be there. It keeps going down the assembly line, comes off the line. The car will crank, but it won't start because there's no fuel getting to it. Can't drive at night because there's no lights. That's what happens, call them birth defects. There's not a single birth defect that's genetic. All birth defects are, in fact, preventable. We've done it in the animal industry. So let's look at some of this stuff. Just so you don't think I was giving you false figures, when it comes to live births and first-month survivability of our babies, we're number 41 in the world. It says the USA shame. That is not true. That is not true. Because you put up money. You spend more money for health care than all the other nations of the world combined. So it's not America's shame. It's the OBGYN shame. If every OBGYN was put in jail for 6 months every time they had a baby born with a birth defect in a pregnancy that they monitored, after a couple of years, there wouldn't be any more babies born with birth defects because they'd learned what I'm going to teach you tonight. So pay attention here. Okay. Now, whether you agree with Sarah Palin's politics or not, she was a very powerful woman. She was the governor of Alaska. She was the vice presidential candidate for this United States for a large party, political party. And her OBGYN, who monitored her pregnancy, allowed her pregnancy to result in a very, I'm sure, very nice child, but with Down syndrome. Trisomy 21, Down syndrome, is not a genetically transmitted disease. It's a simple nutritional deficiency in the first 10 minutes of pregnancy. When a woman misses 2 periods and then she goes on prenatal vitamins, it's 2 months too late. The first 10 minutes of pregnancy, if you don't have everything that baby needs, 1 out of 700 babies, out of the millions of babies that are born every year in America, 1 out of 700 babies in this country are born with Down syndrome. Somebody needs to go to jail here, folks. Totally unnecessary. How many of you heard of cerebral palsy? There's a cerebellum, little part of the brain that controls your fine motor movements so you can play the piano and stand on one foot and balance yourself and all this kind of stuff. It's called the cerebellum. And when a baby's born, it's about the size of a tangerine if it's normal. But babies with cerebral palsy, their cerebellum's the size of a grape. Not genetic, it's just when there was babies going down the assembly line, the stuff that was necessary to make that cerebellum wasn't there. And it could be the size of a grape, it could be half the size of a tangerine, 3/4 of the size of a tangerine. Extremely minor cerebral palsy. There's some with modest, some modestly severe, and some severe, and then there's some catastrophic, like this young lady. Totally preventable. You see, the embryo starts out as a disc, and then it folds into a tube. And all this stuff going on, if the things aren't there when it's supposed to be, you get these defects. And who should we blame? Should we blame ourselves? Is America's shame? No. It's the OBGYNs. How much nutrition do they get? 0. In 8 years of medical school, they get 0 nutrition. And what is the most important thing in the life of an embryo? Nutrition. Somebody needs to go to jail. And then, talk about all these cleft lip, cleft palates. These are all simple nutritional deficiencies of the embryo. When the baby is a flat disc, it folds up, and it doesn't fold up all at once. It's kind of like a zipper as it's folding. So it starts out at the top and goes on down to the bottom. And you get belly button hernias. You get things like hiatal hernias in the diaphragm. And you can find a good Christian surgeon who will donate his time to sew these little kids up. It'll cost you $250 that save the children for each kid for the anesthesia and the suture material to sew them up so they can suck on a straw and speak intelligibly. They're not going to look beautiful like movie stars because they're still going to have massive scars and things. But these things are totally preventable. So now you're armed. Now you're dangerous because you know something. And so when do you start a child with all 90 essential nutrients, all 90 essential vitamins and minerals? Well, before they're conceived. Before they're conceived. All through the pregnancy that they're developed in, from the moment they're born. And after 1 generation, we will never have a child with any birth defect. Now, how many of you heard of genetics? DNA, that double helix, all that kind of stuff. Well, the double helix in the DNA was identified in 1953 by James Watson, an American, and Francis Crick, a Englishman. And they were running up and down, we found it! We know the secret of life now. If you have a genetic disease like diabetes, we can engineer in a test tube a normal gene from you. We can take a stem cell for you. We'll engineer a perfectly normal gene for diabetes, and we'll replace your diabetes genes with it, and we'll get rid of your disease. I mean, they were excited. 9 years later, they actually got the Nobel Prize for it, for mapping out this double helix structure. And I mean, science went to work. They came up with 850 genetics tests. 850 genetics tests, right? This is December 2012, cover article, Time Magazine. I just love it that Time Magazine knows more than the medical trade. They don't know their anatomy, though. They say this baby's colon cancer gene is in his right shoulder. His glaucoma gene for blindness in the eye is in his right knee. And his prostate cancer gene is in his left knee. Well, guess what? They have all these tests. We've spent $1 trillion. That's $1,000 billion we've spent mapping out the human genome. How many know in 2001 we did it? We've mapped out the human genome. We know all the sequence of all the things now, right? That was 12 years ago. Now, to the date, when they got their Nobel, when they discovered it in 1953, Watson and Crick, Watson, 60 years to the date, March 22nd, 2013, says, and he was speaking to the University of California, San Diego, and the Salk Institute, and he said, gene sequencing is not the solution to solving diseases. The solution is good chemistry, means vitamins and minerals. Gene sequencing to cure cancer and diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure and all this kind of stuff is irrelevant. Everything they've done in the last 60 years with genetics, the guy who got the Nobel Prize for it says it's irrelevant. Now, I said that in 1978, and they all laughed at me. Of course, most of them that laughed at me are all dead. But Watson said you can sequence 150,000 people a day, and you're not going to cure cancer, diabetes, or any other disease. Most of the experiments we've done over the last 6 years have been irrelevant because none of it's genetic. So I have a book coming out at the end of this year. It's my 14th book. This is the cover of it. Epigenetics, the death of the genetic theory of disease transmission. All the diseases that are said to be genetic are in here and shows you how to prevent them and how to reverse them. Okay? Now here it comes. Now be alert for this one. This is it now. There's a very boring scientific journal called Food Chemistry. You pick that thing up and you open it up and it's just page after page of columns of numbers and things. And just like carrot and numbers and beets and numbers and corn and numbers. And what they do, they send teams of graduate students out to farms, and they personally harvest some carrots and beets and corn and wheat and tomatoes and beans and peas, and then they run them to the lab and they find out what nutrition's in them and they find out what pollution's in them. And then they follow that farmer's harvest to the stores and they rerun it again for nutrition and pollution and see what pollution was added to it during the processing and getting there and how much nutrition was lost during the packaging and shipping and unpackaging and putting on the store. Well, in April 2012, April 16, this issue said, commercial available baby foods, they looked at 8 of them. We're talking about Gerber, Similac, Enfamil, very trusted names in America. Okay, commercial available baby foods may contain less than 20% of the recommended levels of many minerals and vitamins. Less than 20%. Dog food has 100%. Laboratory rat food has 100%. Laboratory rabbit food has 100%. Chicken, sheep, pig, horse, cow food has 100%. And your babies and grandbabies have less than 20%. Why is that? Because the medical trade, in 8 years of medical school, gets no nutrition. They just train them how to take your credit card and how to prescribe prescriptions. That's it. This is the cause of most of our problems right here. And so now I'm going to tell you, remember, I have a degree in agriculture. I'm a veterinarian. I'm a comparative pathologist. One project for National Institutes of Health at Emory University, I did over 20,000 autopsies, 20 million chemistries. It's published in a 1,200-page book that's in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure. I then went on and became a physician because I couldn't get doctors to do what I was saying to do, so I went and did it myself. Sometimes you just got to do it. And so that's where I come from. Well, in the veterinary industry, we've eliminated 900 different diseases that still plague people. Not with wonder drugs and stem cells and organ transplants and genetically engineered proteins. We did it simply by putting vitamins and minerals in our dog food. We eliminate every birth defect you can name and 10 times that many you can't. Just simply by putting vitamins and minerals in our dog food. We've tripled their lifespan. 6 years ago, an old dog was 8 years old. Today, an old dog is 25. We did that simply by putting vitamins and minerals in our dog food. And so I decided to treat people like dogs, and you know what? They got better. Newsweek magazine, cover story, and that's most people's initial reaction. They get a little giggle out of this kid. He thinks he's won the lottery. He's clutching this nice warm envelope full of supersized French fries. He is one happy kid, right? But he's doomed. He says, when I grow up, I'm going to weigh 300 pounds. Help. It's not genetic. It's actually a simple nutritional deficiency disease. I don't know how many of you know this, but I actually wrote a book, early 2004, something like that, called Hell's Kitchen. It was actually based on a sermon that I gave in my own church in San Diego. And the pastor gave me permission. We have a CD of it. And I said, Pastor, I want to call it Hell's Kitchen. And he thought for me, he said, well, hell yeah. So I thought he was cool. And so we sell millions of that little CD. And the book, Hell's Kitchen, goes into all the proof that obesity is a simple nutritional deficiency disease. Now, how many of you know that we're the #1 obese nation in the world? We spend more money for health care than all the nations of the world combined, and the only thing we can brag about being #1 in the area of health is we're the most obese nation in the world. And so what does that tell you about what the medical system knows about obesity? Veterinarians know everything about it. I can make prime beef. I can make beef with no fat on it. So I use the same principles, right? In 1978 I started. It's a simple nutritional deficiency. We do this thousands of times a day now. We get people to lose 140 pounds in 100 days. We get people to lose 90 pounds in 75 days. We get thousands of people every day to lose 50 pounds in a couple of months. It's very simple stuff. Once you know what button to push, it's easy. Now here comes the beauty of this whole thing. June 20th, 2013, the AMA declared obesity a disease. Well, hallelujah! See, prior to that time, they said obesity is just people making bad choices in food and lack of exercise and too much screen time and all that kind of stuff. No, it's a simple nutritional deficiency disease. I'm going to prove that to you here in a minute. It's a simple, you take the nutrients and it just goes away. It's real simple. Now, I guarantee you, they didn't do this out of the goodness of their heart that they declared a disease. And here's why I say this. Well, the medical system, because of this new healthcare thing coming on, is hurting, particularly specialists. Medicare, when the doctor bills Medicare for $100, Medicare only pays them $20. So the primary care physicians, the family doctors, aren't referring patients out anymore. You know, a primary care physician can do a hip replacement operation. There's no law that says he can't. Primary care physician can write prescriptions for radiology to do heart tests, and he can then prescribe you the same drugs that a specialist would. And so suddenly now the family doctors are keeping the complicated patients because Medicare is not paying much anymore. So the specialists are starving. So they're looking around. They're selling their businesses to hospitals. Hospitals are tripling the prices of tests and prostheses and surgeries and procedures and drugs because they have no competition out in the field anymore, so they just triple the price. Once they bought up the last doctor practice in town, they just triple the price. They have no competitors anymore. Isn't that lovely? Now, so why then did doctors declare obesity a disease? Because insurance pays for diseases. He said, well, where are all the fish at? Well, the fish are in obesity. And so we'll declare a disease now so insurance will pay for it. Now we can make our house payment. That's why they did it. It's not because of the goodness of their heart. How many heard of ADD, ADHD, and autism? It has nothing to do with vaccinations. None of those things have anything to do with vaccinations. I'm a pathologist, so I do crazy things. I looked at batch numbers that nobody else did before. I look at batch numbers on vaccinations. There's only less than a dozen manufacturers of childhood vaccinations, and then they private label them to all these distribution companies and everything. Use the same raw materials. They have the same batch numbers no matter whose labels on there. They use the same batch numbers. And they use the same batch numbers in Africa and Asia and Europe and North America and Central America and South America. But 95% of all autism, ADD, and ADHD, 95% is in this country. So it's not the vaccinations. Let's see, remember food chemistry, April 16th, 2012? Our babies are getting less than 20% of the nutrients they require. Your brain requires nutrients, so you're getting less. I mean, there's no nutrition in Fruity Pebbles and apple juice. There's no nutrition in Sugar Frosted Flakes and Welch's grape juice. There's no nutrition in Eggos or instant oatmeal and Sunny Delight. That's why we have all these problems with these kids, because their brains are dying of malnutrition, not vaccinations. How many heard Alzheimer's disease? Raise your hand. This article came out, obviously, February of this year, said Alzheimer's patients could triple by 2050. Well, I guarantee they are, because there's 80 million baby boomers coming along who are reaching that age. They're over 65 now, and so there's 80 million of them. That's 1/3 of our population. So they're going to triple. I mean, that's just sheer, simple fourth grade math. It's not a big deal, right? Doctors say, help us. We need to find something to help us keep the number of Alzheimer's patients down to 13.8 million a year. I'm going to show you how to eliminate it, because it's a physician-caused disease. Alzheimer's disease did not exist in any way, shape, or form in 1942. Today, it's the number 4 killer of adults over the age of 65. Look at who owns all the hospices. Medical doctors. Now here comes the medical doctors. I thought politicians were bad, but medical doctors are the only people who can say 3 lies in the same sentence. Alzheimer's is the only disease amongst the top 6 killers in the USA for which there's no prevention, cure, or treatment. None of those 3 are true. Doctors are so terrible when it comes to dementia. If you reach the age of 65, 1 in 3 of Americans who reach age 65 will die from dementia. They suck when it comes to this, my grandkids would say. Now, why do our kids die before we do? Well, right now, there's more kids under the age of 18 dying of stroke in America than people over the age of 65. That's because stroke is not genetic. Stroke is not an accidental thing or just some dumb thing happening. I actually sued the FDA over this, and I prevailed, but doctors don't pay attention to those sorts of things. They keep doing what they do, right? So what causes stroke? It's a deficiency of or a ratio problem between omega-3s, 6s, and 9s. I actually sued the FDA over this. To be able to say you can supplement with omega-3s and actually reduce and eliminate thrombotic stroke, blood clots in the brain, coronary thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, and deep vein thrombosis. Before I sued the FDA in federal court and prevailed, with my own money, no, we didn't have any organization. It was my money because I couldn't stand it anymore. You see, there's no omega-3s in Cheerios or oatmeal or Sunny Delight. You can only say, before I sued them, you can only say eating foods rich in omega-3s could reduce the risk of thrombotic stroke and coronary thrombosis. I had to sue them to be able to say, like I'm telling you tonight, you can supplement properly and guarantee you're never going to have that problem. Okay? Now, I'm 74 years old. I've never been to a doctor in the last 65 years. Never been on a prescription medication. I don't have any health problems. Nobody's going to steal an airplane with me on it. I find it amusing that they'll take your fingernail clipper away from you, and I can kill 3 people in a minute with my ballpoint pen. Government is typically stupid, right? AARP, American Association of Retired People, they're marketing to 55-year-olds now. I love that. Okay, March 2012, a little over a year ago, cover article, the worst place to be in America when you're sick is an American hospital. I took 2 pieces out of the article and it says the number of American patients who die each year from American hospital errors is equal to 4 jumbo jets crashing each week, say 1,500 people. 3,000 every 2 weeks, 6,000 a month, 72,000 a year. If you knew that commercial airlines killed 72,000 passengers a year, how many of you would fly? Nobody would fly. I got to go see my doctor. I got to go see my doctor. I got to go see my doctor. Okay, then it also said in that article, each U.S. surgeon operates on the wrong person, wrong body part as often as 40 times a week. Even a 3-year-old knows left from right. That was in March. In December of 2012, each surgeon in the United States makes thousands of errors. They get a walk. Now, why is that? 1914, almost exactly 100 years ago, medical doctors legislated themselves into a protected monopoly. There was a thing called the Flexner Report back in 1914. They legislated themselves into a protected monopoly. They're the only legal monopoly in America. They legislated, not only did they legislate themselves into being a monopoly, but they legislated all their competition into being quacks. If you're not an MD, you're a quack. The federal government, the state government, the county and city only recognize MDs. The military only recognize MDs. And yet they have failed us terribly. We rank 92nd in the world in healthfulness. We rank 60th in longevity. And we rank 41st in live births and first month survivability of our babies. There's no competition. You see, I can't go to a public meeting and say, you don't have to take drugs for diabetes for 30 years and go blind, get your legs cut off, and have 25 years of your life go away and gain too much weight and all this kind of stuff. With a little simple nutritional program, which we call the Healthy Blood Sugar Pack, you know, there's over $100 billion worth of research into that Healthy Blood Sugar Pack. Sounds pretty simple, Healthy Blood Sugar Pack, but there's $100 billion worth of research in that. We've known for 70 years it's a simple mineral deficiency disease. You take this, within 4 to 6 weeks, you'll be off your medication, you'll be an ex-diabetic. It's that simple. Newsweek magazine, cover article, August 2011. The one word that will save your life in a hospital. It's a 2-letter word that every 2-year-old knows. No! Okay, we've given you 6 rounds of chemotherapy. Now you have 3 minutes to live. We want to try this new experimental drug on you. That's because the FDA requires them to tell them how many people out of every 100 they give the drug to, how many are killed by the drug. They're using you as a guinea pig. When they say you've only got weeks to live and we want to try this new experimental drug on you, that's to find out if it kills you or not. And so you should say, no! Wouldn't you rather the last 2 weeks of your life, wouldn't you rather be in your own bed with your dog on your lap, hugging your grandkids, than instead of when your grandkid comes to the hospital because everybody knows you only have days or weeks to live, and the nurse says, no, I'm sorry, honey, you can't go in to see your grandma now. She's being killed by the doctor. That's what it translates to. You can't see your grandma now. She's in intensive care. What kind of nonsense is that? Stop taking them to hospice. Hospice nurses will come to your home. Do hospice at home. Don't give those doctors every last penny the family has. That's the centerfold from that issue in Newsweek magazine. What is he afraid of? This is a universal fear posture, right? No matter what language you speak, no matter what color you are, this is a fear posture. Whether it's spacemen or Godzilla or whatever, right? And so what is he afraid of? Well, I'll tell you, there's 7 doctors on the opposing page coming to him. I want you to look at them and see if they're coming to him with a good Christian heart. They look like a scene from the Night of the Walking Dead TV series. That's because he's the only one in the hospital with money. They're all after him. Everybody else in the hospital is a Medicare patient, and they don't want them. They'll kill each other trying to get to him. Reader's Digest. Very warm, fuzzy magazine. You find it in all professional waiting rooms, whether an attorney or an architect or a doctor or a veterinarian, a dentist. Everybody has Reader's Digest. You don't even need to read it. You know there's going to be warm, fuzzy stories. Dog drags a 2-year-old out of the house during a fire. 4-year-old calls 911, saves grandma's life. That's the kind of stuff that you find in Reader's Digest. Well, in June of 2007, hospital mistakes you can avoid. Look at the font size. It's blood red. It's screaming at you to read this thing. Do you think every doctor made sure this issue was in their waiting room? No, I don't think so. I spent 20 years in the Air Force myself. I love veterans. And this study came out. It was from the Department of Veterans Affairs did this study. It was a self-study. Okay, and it came out in December of 1997, and they published it to the public in 1999. Hundreds of thousands of mistakes each year in the VA system, 3,000 of which are serious, where they take out the healthy lung, they leave the cancerous lung in. You go in for a hemorrhoid operation, and they take your cerebellum out of your brain or something. You know, really dumb stuff. And 3,000 of those mistakes are that serious. The person either dies in the hospital or they are required to stay another year. Well, look at what the Department of Veterans Affairs said about 700 of these 3,000 major mistakes. They kill 700. Do you know how many American servicemen and women were killed last year in Afghanistan? 380. Medical doctors in the VA system kill more American servicemen and women every year than the enemy. When do you get angry enough to do something about it? Okay, we have to do something. And what it's going to take is for us to stop going to them. We have to take care of our loved ones. We have to take care of ourselves. Last year, we set a record. And more servicemen returning kill themselves than the last 10 years combined. That's because they live on MREs, which is nothing more than a meal bar, and distilled water. No vitamins and minerals. So if you have anybody in the service, in your family or in your church, you need to be sending them the 90 essential nutrients. They'll come home, they'll be okay. They're out there carrying those 80-pound packs. They sweat. They don't get any nutrition. They sweat out all that nutrition. This is one of my favorite stories. It came out February 2007. Look at the title, Patient Protect Thyself. It's kind of vanilla. The data that I'm going to share with you came from the Journal of the American Medical Association, the most prestigious medical journal in America, maybe the world, and the Center for Disease Control, again, that federal agency that tracks this kind of stuff in Atlanta, Georgia. And they said, this article said, using those two agencies as their source of information. And it said, each year in America, medical doctors kill, injure, and infect 15 million of their customers at their workplace. Each year in America, medical doctors kill, infect 15 million of their customers at their workplace. 5.8 million in hospitals and 9.2 million in the private offices and clinics. Now, how many of you would fly commercial airlines if you knew that they killed, injured, and infected 15 million passengers every year? Nobody would fly. So, we went to war in Afghanistan because the bad guys killed 3,000 New Yorkers. Here's one group of tradesmen here in this country yearly kill, injure, and infect 15 million. Got a few more of these, and I think you'll have the picture, and then we'll get to the diseases. But I think you need to know what the problem is. Being a veterinarian and a physician, this is important to me, this one. Remember I said each year in America, according to the Center for Disease Control, which they also did this study, Center for Disease Control of Atlanta, and the Journal of the American Medical Association, medical doctors each year in their workplace kill, injure, and infect 15 million. Well, in the hospitals, remember this is just the hospitals, this does not include clinics. in the hospital. There's 2 million infections each year. Of those 2 million infections each year, 90,000 die. Okay, now, I'm going to show you. People say, he's exaggerating. Why did I show you this? You haven't seen the next slide yet. Now, how does that happen? How can that happen in a hospital? It's supposed to be a refuge, a place of safety. And so at any rate, what happens is they wear the same white coat, the same pantyhose, the same trousers, the same shoes, room to room to room, dragging snot, pee, poop, blood, pus, viruses, bacteria, fungus, and yeast. By contrast, in a pig barn, by federal law, to prevent the spread of swine flu, if you're a visitor or a worker, every morning when you go into that barn, you have to take a shower with disinfectant soap for like 5 minutes. You tear open a bag with a clean pair of coveralls and boots. And before you go from one pig pen to the next, you're required to stand for 4 minutes in a 4-inch deep tub of disinfectant and then brush your boots off with a brush before you go to the next pig pen. We treat pigs in a barn better than we treat human beings in a hospital in this country. Okay, this came out in August of 2012, about 10 months ago now. One bacteria, C. diff, Clostridium difficile, which is a human poop bacteria. That's what it's only found in human poop. Of those 90,000 deaths each year from infections in hospitals, 30,000, 1/3 of them occur because doctors don't wash their hands. In 1993, there were 85,700 of these C. diff infections reported in hospitals, 30,000 of which result in death. 17 years later, 2010, it went up 400% to just short of 350,000, 346,800. Does this chart give you some sense that they're working hard to prevent the problem? No. There's no consequences. Why should they wash their hands? If they're doing the right thing, that chart should look like that. This is what you're getting. As your hospitals, folks. Well, let's look at pharmaceuticals. Well, everybody loves pharmaceuticals. I mean, we have war on street drugs. And of course, for the last 50 years, the pharmaceutical industry and the medical doctors have been after the FDA to report adverse events calls on herbs, vitamins, and minerals. So in 2007, they did it for the first time, reported in 2008. There were 600 adverse event calls. And of course, the pharmaceutical industry and the medical doctors assured the FDA was going to be in the thousands. 400 adverse events reports for herbs. None of them were fatalities. They were like fast heart rate from too much green tea and a mixture, or they got maybe itchy skin from something. 200 of these were adverse events from vitamins, minerals. Somebody takes too much vitamin C, they get diarrhea. They take too much niacin, vitamin B3, they get itchy, rashy skin. No deaths. Well, the same year in 2007, which they'd been doing for 50 years, they reported, not to the public, but in the mortality and morbidity reports which come out every week, right? They reported it for the pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs. Now, it's in this report here, but it's very difficult to see. It's down here in the corner, so I blew it up because most people, by the time they get to here, they're not going to read the whole thing. So they purposely put it down here, very tiny little thing. I blew it up so you can compare this 600 adverse events reports, non-fatalities, with 482 154 adverse events reports for prescription drugs that same year. All of these were fatalities. You tell me what's more dangerous, pharmaceuticals or vitamins and minerals. But it's FDA approved. People always ask me, well, are your vitamins and minerals FDA approved? And I say, drop your knees and give thanks to the Lord they're not. Because everything the FDA approves kills people. Every drug the FDA approves, every drug, even baby aspirin has a little warning on there. One of the side effects may be death. This is a yearly figure, and this is another look at the pharmaceutical thing. Deaths by medication error rising. Now, they're not talking about the side effects of the drugs here. They're talking about decimal point errors, which I'm sure the pharmacists, thank God, catch some of that stuff when it comes in. And then, of course, doctors will prescribe 3 or 4 different drugs to the same patient, particularly older people, because insurance pays, and they get a kickback, right? And so they do that, and of course you get potentiation, and that combination will kill the patient. These types of medication errors each year are tied to 1.5 million fatalities and permanent injuries. Okay? Only you can stop this. When the doctor writes prescriptions, tear it up in front of them and say, sorry. Okay. This is the last one of this kind of really bad series, and we'll move on to the next subject. This came out in 2010. Hospital care fatal for some patients. That's kind of vanilla. Results of Medicare study alarming. Well, that's alarming. Well, the study was actually done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. Okay, so this study was done by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General, which is the auditor for Medicare. Okay, What they said was that each month, not each year, each month in America, medical doctors kill 15,000 Medicare patients from simple tests and minor procedures. They kill 15,000 Medicare patients each month. That's 180,000 a year. If you're over age 65 and you knew that commercial airlines killed 180,000 seniors over age 65 every year, you'd say, honey, cancel the airplane flight. I turned 65 yesterday. We're going Amtrak. I'm going to show you three people, very famous people who died as seniors at the hands of doctors for minor procedures. Andy Rooney, 60 Minutes, retired at 92. His wife is 87. They were going to go on a world cruise for a year. And she was a little nervous. She said, look, we can't speak half those languages at the place we're going. We need to take a disc of our health care stuff in case we get sick or that age. You know, he said, okay. So they go to the doctor, and while they're waiting for the disc to be cut with all their medical records in it, the doctor's rooting through Andy's medical records. He says, Andy, you're 92 years old, and I can't find where you've ever had a colonoscopic exam. You could have cancer lurking around in you. I wasn't there, of course, but I know Andy Rooney because I used to watch him every Sunday on 60 Minutes. I just loved his sense of humor. And I can see him saying, well, I don't have any blood in my bowel movement. I haven't had a change in my bowel habits in the last 10 years. I haven't lost any weight. I don't have any pelvic pain. I don't think I have any colon cancer. That's what he should have said. But I'm sure the doctor insisted. And he should have said, Andy should have said, no! But instead he said, being a compliant 90-year-old, he said, oh, okay. Comes in the next day. The doctor sticks a garden hose up his rump, punctures his intestine. 3 days later, he's dead from peritonitis, belly infection. Wife's a widow, and he never went on his trip. Now, when you look at his obituary, you can look it up online. It says, Mr. Rooney died from complications of a minor medical procedure. Wasn't minor for him, it killed him. Dick Clark, the guy who discovered the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, the world's oldest teenager kind of guy, 82 years old, goes in for his physical, complains to his doctor. He gets up 3 or 4 times a night to take a pee because, you know, he's that age, 82 years old, and the doctor says, well, you probably have a prostate problem. I'm going to send you down the hall when I'm done with you. We've got a urologist to take care of you. Urologist examines, yeah, you got an enlarged prostate here, a few lumps and bumps on it. We can take it out. I can put you ahead of the list. I can do it tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. And he says, well, I didn't reach my age by going to surgery for everything. I said, do you have a prescription? He said, it doesn't work. This is an outpatient procedure. No big deal. You come in at 11 o'clock, 11:30 we're done, 1 o'clock you're in the golf course. We do this all the time. No big deal. And Dick Clark should have said, no! But instead he said, oh, okay. Goes in 11 o'clock the next morning, 11:30 he's dead. 30,000 men in America each year, 30,000 men in America each year die within an hour after the procedure. Because when you cut on the prostate gland, either with a knife or a scissors or stick it with a large biopsy needle, it releases a hormone called prostaglandin, which increases your risk of death from coronary thrombosis, or a thrombotic stroke. And he won the lottery and had both. My favorite, though, is Neil Armstrong, our top astronaut, first man to walk on the moon. He personally saved 2 doomed NASA missions, saved the spacecraft, saved the crews, because of his technical knowledge on how to communicate with the machinery and the equipment in a spacecraft from a computer on Earth. I mean, we have more information and more technology in this little smartphone than they had on the spaceships, right? But he had enough, he could save those 2 crews. He goes in for his physical, 82 years old. The doctors come out and said, astronaut Armstrong, that NASA program must be wonderful. You're 82 years old, you have perfect health, you don't have any symptoms of any kind, your laboratory work is perfect. The only thing we can find, one coronary artery is 30% blocked, not going to cause angina, no chest pain. The odds of you getting a heart attack from that are very low. But if you wait 5 or 6 or 8 years, it's a progressive thing. It'll get worse. You could die, go into the hospital with a heart attack, blah, blah, blah. You're fit now. You should let us put a stent in there, do a bypass. You'll never have a heart attack from that artery. He should have said, no! Instead, he said, okay, let's do it. 3 days later, he was dead from complications resulting from an elective cardiovascular procedure, an unnecessary cardiovascular procedure. We could clean that artery out in just a couple of weeks. There was no investigation by NASA. There was no investigation by the state, New York State Medical Society. There was no investigation by the hospital medical board. What if Al-Qaeda would have kidnapped him, cut his head off on YouTube? We'd have sent in drones. We'd have sent in SEAL Team Number 6. Somebody would have died if they had killed our top astronaut. But if doctors do it, it's okay. Okay, cholesterol. There's not a single disease that's caused by elevated blood cholesterol. Normal cholesterol for a human being is 220 to 270. Where did I get that figure? It's from a study that was done back in the 1950s at the University of California, San Francisco. Stephen B. Hulley was the guy he's a cardiologist, and he's also an epidemiologist. He looked at 300,000 people. Of those 300,000, 6% had blood cholesterol below 200. And for start of the study, for 20 years, he thought they were going to be the ones that have the fewest cardiovascular events and live the longest. Well, the ones who lived the longest and didn't have any cardiovascular events were ones who had cholesterol of 220, 270. He reported that in the Journal of the American Medical Association. You know how many doctors paid attention to it? 0. Because they have all these cute little gals coming from the pharmaceutical companies, and their little mini skirts to the doctors, taking them out to lunch, and they all write prescriptions for Mevacor, Lipitor, Zocor, and all those core things, right, to lower your cholesterol. Well, I actually did a study. When you do 20,000 autopsies and 10 million chemistries, you have a lot of material. I wrote 75 scientific papers, plus that book out of the deal. One of my papers was I compared the coronary artery plugging in vegetarians and vegans versus meat eaters. Guess who had the worst plugged arteries? Vegans. Because cholesterol has nothing to do with it. Nothing! What plugs your arteries in? Inflammation. How many of you heard of the inflammation thing? That's getting to be new around, right? Well, I said that in 1971. It was published in an international pathology journal in 8 languages. It was published in Denmark, all went around the world. I had thousands of calls, and then nobody did anything. He used to hang around with 25 pathologists. We'd all go to the continuing education together. We were kind of buddies, you know. We'd have dinner together and party together. And they all laughed at me. He said, well, you must be sniffing glue. Everybody knows it's cholesterol. I said, no, I did all these autopsies. And the ones who are the worst are the vegans and vegetarians because they stir fry everything in coconut oil and olive oil. They use a lot of salad dressings for calories because they don't get enough calories. They don't have any dense food like meat and things like that. So they're using all these oils as a source of calories. Trans fatty acids, heterocyclic amines, acrylamides cause inflammation. The arteries respond by plugging. Well, that was in 1971. Here we are, February 2012, a year and a half ago. Federal health officials are adding new safety warnings about the risk of statin drugs, the widely prescribed group of cholesterol-lowering medications. If you take a statin drug to lower your cholesterol every day for 10 years, and you are on a cholesterol-restricted diet every day for 10 years, you increase your risk of Alzheimer's disease by 100%. You're going to get it. And here's why. What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's disease is a going away of the myelin, the white matter of the brain. It makes up 75% of your brain weight. It's the insulation material in the brain. Okay? When it goes away, the naked nerve fibers tangle up, and they short circuit, and you get Alzheimer's disease. Now, I can take a brain at autopsy, and I can never read the clinical records, and I can tell you by looking at that brain under the microscope, if there's nerve tangles in there, I can tell you that person had Alzheimer's disease, just by looking at slides of the brain. I don't even need to hear the clinical records, because that's what we call a pathognomonic lesion. It's a lesion that's drop dead, predictable as gravity. That's it. There's no other option. And then, of course, that same scenario will increase your risk of type 2 diabetes by 52%. What disease is costing us the most money in America right now? Diabetes. Our Alzheimer's patients are going to triple because all the baby boomers come along who lived on egg beaters and egg white omelets and boneless, skinless chicken breasts and oils and margarine instead of butter, cream, and lard, and tofu and beans instead of red meat. Third world countries don't have Alzheimer's disease because they're eating meat. In June of that same year, 2012, Science News, very respectable journal. Good cholesterol not so beneficial. I want you to email your doctor and say, I just saw something in Science News that said good cholesterol is not so beneficial. He will scream, you know, like they do on his emails and go crazy. What? That can't be true. Higher HDL, high density lipoproteins, and good cholesterol levels don't reduce heart attacks. That's because cholesterol has nothing to do with heart attacks. Let's say your blood cholesterol is 200, and 100% of it's HDL, the good cholesterol. It won't reduce your risk of heart attacks because cholesterol has nothing to do with heart attacks. When you lower your cholesterol, and you have cholesterol above 300, remember, 220, 270 is normal. You want it to be in between 220 and 270. 300 just means you're sexier. Because, you ever hear of steroid hormones? Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone? 95% of steroid hormones is cholesterol. You go on a cholesterol-restricted diet, you give up eggs, there ain't nobody home anymore. Women used to go through menopause when they were 70 years old in 3 seconds. Now women go through menopause in 30 years. They accept prescription drugs that cause breast cancer, you know, the hormones and everything. Oh, but they're bioidentical. That's just like saying, but the bullet is lead, you know, it's copper jacketed. There's not a single medical screening test that prevents the disease. There's not a single medical screening test that prevents the disease. The Globe and Mail is the USA Today equivalent in Canada. I speak a lot up there, probably about a month and a half if you count all the days out of each year. Screening is not prevention. Okay, mammograms, of course, are one of the things that women submit to. This was a 30-year study, a 3-decade study at Harvard Medical School, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, and it was published last year, November 2012. And here's the results. It said, in women over 40, 1.3 million of them over the past 3 years actually had false positives. That amounted to 31% of all women diagnosed with breast cancer with a mammogram. 31% were false positives. This is in the New England Journal of Medicine, November 2012. The worst year was 2008, where they had 70,000 false positives. They cut these women's breasts off. They give them chemotherapy and radiation. They put them in the cure column. They know they didn't have it. And these women run around like Judas goats. Oh, you have to go to Dr. So-and-so. He's so good. He caught my cancer early with a mammogram, and I want you to get a mammogram. They said, well, mammograms are safe. They have less radiation than a AAA battery. Well, they came out 3 months ago and said one mammogram has the same amount of radiation as 500 chest x-rays. You know, you can do a better job of self-breast examination even if you're 20 years into menopause. You self-breast exam, keep a log, 15th of every month at 10 o'clock in the morning. You find something new. You find something that's tender that didn't used to be tender. Go yourself. Without the doctor, you go to a radiology laboratory and you ask for a high-resolution ultrasound, no radiation, and it's actually more accurate. Leave the doctor out of the loop. Here's where the insurance fraud comes in. A push to prevent colorectal cancer. Get your colonoscopic exam. Doesn't prevent it. Oh, you had polyps. Well, polyps just means you're eating too much deli slices and too much sandwich meats and too many hot dogs, too much pastrami or pepperoni pizza. Okay? Has nothing to do. Polyps don't become cancer. PSA tests. A federal panel says now, no PSA tests anymore, guys. Do not do it. Why? Because just like Dick Clark, two things happen. You're going to be one of those 30,000 that die within an hour after the surgery, or you're going to be one of the 200 to 300,000 that become permanently impotent, and they get ED permanently, and they're incontinent. They just pee all over themselves. It gives new meaning to the term dirty, smelly old man. June 4th, 2012, Time magazine. Health science section, skip the PSA screen. Experts say PSA blood test for prostate cancer doesn't save lives. That's because it was never meant to be a screen for prostate cancer. The most important part of Warren Buffett's announcement that he was diagnosed with prostate cancer was this paragraph down here. Richard Ablin, the scientist who discovered PSA, calls the testing's widespread use a public health disaster. The guy who invented it calls it a public health disaster. That's because it doesn't diagnose prostate cancer, and you can actually, through an examination, you can actually make it go up. That's why he calls it, Richard Ablin calls it, the guy who invented it, calls it a public health disaster. Okay, well, now we're going to switch to diet. I think you got an idea that doctors and hospitals are dangerous. Pharmaceuticals are dangerous. They are not your first choice. You have to take some responsibility here, okay? This is a Harvard study they did in 1990 for males and females in America. Came out in 1997 to the public. And what they looked at was lifespans county by county. What they're going to do is find out which county lived the longest in America. I thought it was kind of clever. And then they were going to find out what medical care, what medical services they had there. They're going to duplicate that in all the other counties in America and upgrade our average lifespan. Now, from a superficial standpoint, you say, well, man, that's pretty cool. They're thinking about America. But they knew that they were going to have to increase the amount of medical care in every other county, right? Well, what they didn't plan on was they found out that every county in America has the same medical care. You can live under the bridge and be homeless and illiterate, never worked a day in your life, didn't ever have any insurance. You crawl into an emergency room, you will get the same care that a billionaire gets. Not because doctors love you and they're altruistic and they're good Christians. They give this guy living under the bridge the same medical care that a billionaire gets because insurance pays. What they found out was the longest lived people in America are in the purple, in the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and the upper Plain states. The shortest lived people in America in the old Confederate states, plus Cook County, Chicago, and Lake County and Gary, Indiana. Everything west of the Mississippi River is an Indian reservation. Yellow, orange, and red. These are the shortest lived people. The people in the purple, they live 25 years longer than the purple. It's not genetic. What they did find out was how they eat. These people in the purple counties are all people from Scandinavia. Norwegians, Swiss, Swedes, Finnish, Danish, Austrians. They cook everything by roasting, stewing, grilling. How do they cook in the Old South and in Cook County and Lake County? If you never again eat fried foods, if you never again give your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews your fried chicken, you'll add 25 years to their life. If you don't even give them any vitamins and minerals, if you just don't ever eat fried foods again. That's what this is a Harvard study. Well, 23 years later, the University of Wisconsin repeated it. Dietary habits, not hospitals, affect how counties' health care rank. They picked Pennsylvania because it was the worst and the best. It was the good, bad, and the ugly. Philadelphia County, where the city of Philadelphia is in, obviously. First in healthcare, we're talking about most doctors per patient, more hospitals, more CAT scan machines, more pharmacists, more prosthesis. I mean, more of everything, more massage therapists, right? But it had the worst overall health. You see, it's not hospitals, with the exception of bleeding emergencies. That's where they shine, is bleeding emergencies. But when it comes to diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease, they know nothing. When it comes to obesity, they know nothing. They don't know anything there. All they're taught to do is prescribe drugs. They don't know. I can't forgive them for that because they've had 100 years for somebody to stand back and say, you know, we're killing more people than the enemy. We need to stop what we're doing until we figure out a better way. Why is a dumb farm boy from Missouri the one that's doing it? This guy's been dead for 35 years. He's still killing people. Fried food causes trans fatty acids and heterocyclamines and acrylamides. They cause cancer. There's no doubt about that. The FDA knows that. They keep preaching it. Everybody keeps going to Kentucky Fried Chicken. So here's what I urge you to do. I urge you to take your kids, your grandkids to Kentucky Fried Chicken and show them how to eat there safely, because they're going to go with their friends. You can eat Kentucky Roasted Chicken, KRC. You can eat their salad bar. That's it. Nothing else there is safe. Same way with McDonald's. I'm on the road a lot, so I eat a lot of McDonald's, but I'll just have their quarter pounder with some cheese on it, lettuce, tomatoes, and onions, because I can get it in 8 minutes, and it only costs me $3. If I go to Fridays, the same thing will cost me $18, right? But I don't eat the bun, I don't eat the mayonnaise, I don't eat the salads, I don't eat the dressing and all that kind of stuff. I just have my burger, which is 100% meat, and then I put some cheese on there, and I put my lettuce, tomatoes, and onions, and pickles. I use mustard, because all that is mustard seeds and vinegar and salt and water. There's nothing else in there, okay? And so you can be very selective. No fried foods. I do eat their little parfaits, which is a yogurt with 2 ounces of yogurt in it. It has 4 blueberries and a half a strawberry. I know because I do an autopsy on them every time I eat them. This came out October 2012. Just one multiple a day can reduce your risk of cancer. One particular mineral, we've known this since 1957. One mineral, actually went back actually in 1912. One mineral called selenium can reduce your risk of breast cancer, ladies, by 82% if you take 200 micrograms a day. Any woman who didn't have her OBGYN tell you to take 200 micrograms of selenium every day should be put in jail for mass murder. You also, if you cook your meat medium rare instead of well done, you reduce your risk of breast cancer, ladies. It was University of South Carolina did this study, came out in 1998. Reduce your risk of breast cancer by 462%. I don't even know what that means. I know what 100% means, but what does 462% mean? Reduce your risk of 462% of breast cancer if you eat your meat cooked medium rare rather than well done, because of the heterocyclamines and acrylamides that occur when you burn meat. Anybody own a dog? Anybody own a dog? I've already given you the statistics. We've tripled their lifespan. We've eliminated 900 diseases that we still have. And everybody knows you can't give table scraps to a dog because it messes up all the ratios in the food. You buy food that's, I don't know what it is now, 50, 60 cents a can for a perfect diet, perfect nutrition, biochemical nutrition. And triple their lifespan, you eliminate all these diseases. The only time you take the dog, if you give them dog food, the only time you take them to the vet is once a year for a rabies shot because that's the law. You can have a dog for 25 years unless they're really clumsy and stupid and chase cars and get run over. Other than stuff like that, you only have to take your dog for 25 years once a year to the vet to get a rabies shot. Why do we feed our kids and our grandkids food that we know will kill a dog? So, as I told you earlier, I started treating my patients like dogs. We came up with a 90 for life program. How long do you need to take it? For life. How long do you need oxygen? For life. How long do you need water? For life. How long do you need God? For life. How long do you need the 90 essential nutrients? For life. Who came up with the 90 essential nutrients? God. Okay? The Garden of Eden was perfect. It had everything in it. Now, everybody can't go there. There's 7 billion people on earth. But we can take the information. We actually analyzed this all. We know what's in the Garden of Eden. It was the first map quest. I don't know if you realize that. The first map quest is in the Old Testament. The Garden of Eden was east of Eden. There are 4 rivers that dump into it, right? Kishon, Pishon, the Tigris and Euphrates. Those rivers are still dumping into the same place. That's still the Garden of Eden. So I'm going to show you what's in there. There's 90 essential nutrients. They're called essential nutrients, ladies and gentlemen, for 2 reasons. Number 1, we can't do without them. You have to eat them or supplement with them every day because we can't make them. We can't make them. Also, if you don't take them in, if any one of them is missing, you get horrible diseases, all of which are fatal. Some of them take longer to kill you than others, but they'll all kill you. Deficiency diseases. We need 60 minerals. 2/3 of the 90 essential nutrients are minerals, so you know that minerals are important. That's the dust the good Lord made us out of. We need 16 vitamins, 12 essential amino acids, 3 essential fatty acids. And our food plants, our grains, vegetables, fruits, and nuts, can take carbon dioxide out of the air, use the sun's energy in a process known as photosynthesis, and the chlorophyll in the green leaves to lop that O2 off, pump it out in the atmosphere so we can breathe it. Do you think that happened by chance? I don't think so. I think there's an overall plan for this. Okay, so at any rate, then the plant takes the carbon atoms and makes long carbon chains, which become fatty acids, amino acids, and vitamins. Okay? Now, nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. Nutritional minerals occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream. Because I used to ask my grandma, those people down the road were hellions. They all lived to be 100. They never ate anything solid. Everything they consumed was white lightning. They smoked. They stayed up all night and partied, loud music. You'd hear it 3 miles away in a flat land in Missouri. And they lived to be 100. The pastors would die at 42 and 48 and 50. Why was that? Well, the pastor just happened to live on a piece of property that only had 12 minerals in it, and the hellions lived on a piece of property that had 100 minerals, just by dumb luck. But the pastor can supplement, can't he? Now, how many can remember going to your grandma or grandma's house, and they had a grandma and grandpa's house, and they had a wood stove? Anybody remember the wood stove days? Some of you may still have a wood stove or a fireplace. What did everybody do with the wood ashes every morning? Did they throw them in the recycling bin to save the earth? Where did the wood ashes go? In the garden. They went in the garden. Well, wood ashes are not ashes. Somebody gave them that name thousands of years ago, and they kind of stuck affectionately. But that powder that's left in the stove, in the fireplace, in the fire pit is actually the minerals that the trees sucked up out of the ground. When you burn the carbon in the wood, the minerals don't burn. They just fall out as dust. Well, there's that word dust again. Okay, into the fireplace or the wood stove or the fire pit. Then you take them up and you throw them, you broadcast them out in the garden. Plant minerals, a.k.a. wood ashes, and the okra and the sweet potatoes and the onions and the beans and the peas and the squash and tomatoes and the pumpkins and the corn and whatever else you're growing out there. Suck all those minerals up. And Granddaddy did supplement. People say, well, my granddaddy lived to be 102 and he didn't supplement. Well, yes, he did. He put those minerals into the garden. The trees, or the plants sucked them up, and he ate those plants, and he got his minerals in that fashion. He didn't have them in a capsule, but he took those minerals. Okay? That all ended at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882. We know the exact moment because there's a front page story in every newspaper in the world. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, it all ended. This man here on Pearl Street, on the bluff overlooking the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, pulled the switch and turned on the first commercial electric generating plant. Within 10 years, every town and every city in the industrialized world, the first world countries, the rich countries, had converted from wood as a universal fuel to electricity, propane, and natural gas. Now, you tell me how many wood ashes, how many plant minerals are left over in your home when you fuel it with electricity, propane, and natural gas? 0! And what did you replace it with? Nothing. And here comes a doctor strutting around in their white coat and their stethoscope around their neck. You don't need to take them vitamins and minerals. They'll just get expensive. You're going to waste your money. You can get everything you need just by eating well. You don't need to take them vitamins and minerals. They'll kill you. They're very dangerous. You can overdose in them vitamins and minerals. Everybody says, oh, okay, you're the one with the white coat, so I believe you. Now, this is a cornfield in central Nebraska. I want you to look at the uniformity of those rows, the uniformity of the plants. And I'm sure if you look at the ears of corn, they're all uniform too. They're the same genetic variety. But I can guarantee you, just by looking at that picture, I can tell you that there's enough magnesium, which makes the leaves green, to convert energy from the sunlight. There's enough phosphorus, potassium to drive growth in those fields. Because if there wasn't, you'd have bald spots or thin spots. So you know there's optimal amounts of those three minerals. That's all a plant needs to make good seeds for the next generation. Humans and all vertebrates, whether a hummingbird, a human, or an elephant, need 60. Plants only need 3. Do you think farmers put in 60? No, it's too expensive. You wouldn't pay for it. And so they only put in 3 because that's all it takes to get the maximum yields. This is my favorite picture. It's a satellite picture from 100 miles up. This is Southern California agricultural land. This is Pacific Ocean out here. This is Yuma, Arizona over here. Mexico's down here 200 miles south of this Salton Sea, which is a small salt lake, about 1/10 the size of the Great Salt Lake in Salt Lake City, Utah. But why don't you see, remember I told you that nutritional minerals occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ripple ice cream. This is what you're seeing here. All these different swirls and whirls. They're different veins.